I always get mixed up between you and Councilor Clark.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Also present this evening, Councilor Clark and Councilor Boschman. We will start with petition 19516 of City Solicitor Vincent Pusateri to approve the fee schedule and the attached retainer agreement and amend the code of the City of Fitchburg by inserting section 359 permitting the city solicitor and assistant city solicitor to require third parties to pay the City of Fitchburg's legal fees for services performed. Councilors, I have a letter here that was submitted by the city solicitor to the council president and myself. Dear Council President Kuchmarek and Finance Chair Di Natale, kindly accept this letter as my request for leave to withdraw the above referenced petition. During the budget process, it came to the Council President's attention that it would serve the interests of the city to file a petition in connection with legal fees being collected by the Law Department. After filing the petition, criticism was received both from councilors and constituents concerned regarding professional responsibility and ethical issues. After receipt of that criticism, I contacted Attorney Don Gorton at the Department of Revenue, Division of Local Services. I made no further review of the rules of professional responsibility, as I remain confident there is no violation of either set of rules. We have engaged in the practice of determining and charging fees throughout the course of my career as a private attorney. Each matter is substantially unique and requires a different approach. After conferring with DOR, it was clear that a fee schedule is not required here, as all fees have been negotiated and entered into voluntary by the contracting parties. In light of the public comment and other concerns, I felt it important to allow us to have a conversation regarding these issues at our last Finance Committee meeting. Concerns at that time then changed to whether charging fees might interfere with business development within the City of Fitchburg. I remain mindful of the points raised during the public discussion. However, I have decided to withdraw the petition. It is difficult to articulate a standard as to when fees will be requested. It is and will be a matter of contracting. Furthermore, Attorney Gorton confirmed there is no need for a petition. Finally, there has been no complaints in connection with the fees. It is for those reasons I request leave of the council to withdraw the petition. If you have any further questions, please contact me. And the city solicitor is here this evening if any councilors have questions about this. Councilor Donnelly?
I'd just like to make a motion to approve the petition.
Approve it, or
Well, you're supposed to make, so it's not confusing, you make a motion to approve it, get a second, and then it can be
why wouldn't
denied.
we? Okay.
All right, I'll make a motion to deny the petition.
Second. Motion made and seconded to deny the petition. Councilor Joseph.
So all petitions have to be made, all motions have to be made in the positive, like he said. All petitions need to be made in the positive, but in this case, I think we were looking for a leave to withdraw.
It just avoids confusion.
A leave to withdraw as opposed to
Want me to start again?
accept or deny, or accept or
Want me to
reject.
start again?
That's why I had a look on my face. I was expecting a leave to withdraw and not a denial. But if you're willing to,
Well, I think it's easy, just so you know. I mean, you make a motion to approve, and then if you get seconded, vote to deny. But how do you want to make it?
well, we have a motion and a second to deny it.
Okay.
I'll
I'll withdraw my second.
Okay, now I'm looking for a motion.
Make a motion to withdraw 19516.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to withdraw 19516. Speaking on the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It has been withdrawn. 22616, an order that the City of Fitchburg approves the expenditure of funds from the Federal Emergency Management Agency administered through MEMA for the Community Emergency Response Team CERT grant in the approximate amount of $4,676 for the purposes of said grant. Chief Roy.
Councilors, thank you. Councilors, this is our annual CERT grant from the state, which is our Citizens Emergency Response Team, which all you folks know is FEMA. Those folks do lighting at different events for us, pumping cellars, parking. It's not a big grant that the state gives us each year. This year, this money is going to be used towards upgrading our lighting. The bulbs, the LED lighting and things in our new lighting towers are very expensive. So the large share of this money will be used for replacement of some tripods for setting up lights, reserve of light bulbs for all that equipment that we use. And that's Lieutenant Liberatore's group, the emergency management folks, and the equipment they use. And I know you all see it during Civic Days and during other events. It's really helpful to us. And this is a good grant to get because otherwise this money would be coming out of our budget to upgrade this equipment.
Questions? President Kuchmarek.
Chief, can you just give us a sense of how has this dollar amount changed throughout the years? And
It pretty much, it's distributed amongst the state. You have to apply by their rules and their standards of what they allow for purchases. It's pretty much around the $4,000 to $5,000 range each year. It hasn't changed much in recent years.
do you see these funds being available in the upcoming years as well? I mean,
Yeah,
aside
it
to
carried
scale
on
up.
from the last administration, and usually you see that if the Baker administration was going to change it, I think they would have changed it by now. So, I mean, I think they know this is money well spent. It's pretty strict rules. It is competitive. You know, not every community abides by the rules and does it, and our clerical staff and Lieutenant Liberatore do a good job with this, making sure we get the equipment that fits under the grant.
Absolutely.
Motion to approve 22616.
Motion made and seconded to approve 2/20/16. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Thank you, councilors.
22716, order that the City of Fitchburg approves the expenditure of funds from the Mass Department of Conservation and Recreation for the Recreational Trails Program Grant in the approximate amount of $49,995 for the purposes of said grant. Commissioner Laxo, Ms. Morrison.
Thank you. Yeah, Janet Morrison is here for those who might not know her. She's representing the Fitchburg Greenway Committee, and she's been a lot of help to us over the years, especially preserving watershed land. So the Greenway Committee and DPW, as well as the Community Development Department, developed the grant application for the Waterline Connector Trail. This will run from the end of Burma Road, parallel to Franklin Road, down to Fifth Mass Turnpike, for a total of about 1.4 miles. The work will be done in two phases. Phase one will take us from the end of Burma Road up to the condos on the west side of Franklin Road. Then phase two will take us back down the hill from the condos down to Fifth Mass Turnpike. This land is already owned by the city. It's a 50-foot wide strip of land owned by the Water Department because they have a major water main running along that corridor. And basically the trail is already passable. It's been there for years. The Water Department keeps it clear for their own maintenance purposes. And basically the grant will allow us to provide for a better surface on the trail. So the trail will be good for recreational purposes, and it might provide access for people to Wachusett Station. So I don't know if Janet has anything to add to that.
Sure. Thanks, Lenny. The Fitchburg Greenway Committee, as Lenny indicated, which isn't just an ad hoc committee, we try to work with the city to enhance natural resources and trails. This looked like a terrific opportunity to use an existing strip of land already owned by the city, already needed to be maintained and kept clear because of the water main, to enhance that and create an actual trail. So the application was submitted and awarded. This is an award for 1/2 of the construction of the trail. The money awarded, the $49,000 you see in the article, is actually entirely for materials. So the DPW will be using its own personnel and engineering to lay out and construct the trail. And there's already lots of engineering already done in terms of elevations. This is an area that the city is well known. I guess it's owned by the city for about 70 years or so. So again, this is an opportunity to create a recreational trail. It's something akin, I guess you could say, to a rail trail, in that it affords both recreation and, to some degree, commuting ability, actual transportation by bicycle or on foot. If you think about the path to the new Wachusett Station, you would have to drive through that pinch point at Route 31 where the railroad overpass exists. There's no sidewalk there. There's no room for a sidewalk. Very dangerous for pedestrians and bicyclists to just get through that. This provides an opportunity for an alternative route. It will bypass that. In terms of commuting potential, getting to the station without a car. It's really a great opportunity. And in addition, like recreational rail trails that are so popular, people go there on Sunday with their kids and their bikes, and they ride on the trail because it's a safe place and it's a very nice environment. So we're looking at trying to use some of the city land at the northern end of the trail for a few parking spaces right off of Burma Road, so that the neighborhood is less impacted by anybody who might wish to park a car and utilize the trail. Otherwise, there's really not very much on that trail. There's Bellata Way and those abutters, and also Constitution Drive, that small condominium development. And we have actually, before submitting this grant, the Greenway Committee, in connection with the city, had a public meeting to which everyone was invited, and it was actually fairly, I would say, very well received in terms of what this trail might offer to the neighborhoods on either end and to the city residents in general. The Greenway Committee, in connection with the city, would intend to do another public meeting so that people understand what's going on, so they have an opportunity to ask questions, and if they have any concerns, that we can try to address them. So it's an underutilized place. It's already utilized, but this will allow it to be, the trail would allow it to be more appropriately utilized by more people, making it a safer place, a more welcoming place, and a good place to recreate. So, again, we think it's a real positive thing. The money makes it possible. This would be the first in 2 grants, because the limit on funding is only $50,000, and $50,000 is what's required to construct a half of it. So we would be applying again with the city, or assisting the city to apply for the second half, which would be another $50,000, and then the trail would be completed. It's really relatively inexpensive for 1.25 miles of trails. It's actually quite cheap if you look at the cost of the Twin Cities Rail Trail and how much that's going to cost to get between Fitchburg and Leominster.
This project's estimated to be around $100,000.
The total project award from the Recreational Trails Grant Program, we anticipate will be a total of approximately $100,000. 49, again, the grant max is 50. So the city has received the first 50, and in a 2-phase project, they're very aware that this is a 2-phase project. There will be another grant app for the second phase.
So this $50,000 will be purely for materials
Yes.
that your department's going to procure, and you're going to store the materials at the yard, or, because I'm assuming we can't move forward until we get the next $50,000, the second round.
No, we'll be able to construct the first phase
Half of
by
it, I'm
itself.
sorry. Yeah, okay, half of it. Now, where is the money coming from for your labor? Is that's not from the 50? Where is it coming from? Is it from another grant, or is it from your own budget?
Yeah. Well, I think actually, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the way the grant was written, we're providing in-kind services. I think there's a city match.
There's a match requirement, as in all grants.
Okay.
This, I guess, would be similar to the way the city constructed the Steamline Trail,
Right.
with a lot of DPW help. Again, very, popular trail when it was open. It's going to reopen soon, I hope. But, it is DPW services that are constructing the trail.
Do you have an estimate on that in-kind contribution?
I do. I'll see if I can.
I mean, I'm not asking these questions prying to say that I'm not
No, I
I'm not
understand.
insinuating about the project's merit. I'm just understanding how.
This is the budget you submitted, Lenny, also. I don't know if that's helpful to you.
Right. Yeah, our total labor was about $20,000, which is mostly equipment operators.
That's coming out of your budget.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And how many men are you dedicating to this?
It would. I assume it would be about 3 at a time.
How long is this going to take? The first phase?
I mean, we won't be doing it continuously, but I would assume over a 3-month or so period.
Okay, I'm only prying with these questions, Mr. Laxo, because of the staffing constraints that you already have. So I wrestle with these grants because on the one hand, the trail's a great idea and I'd like to have it. On the other hand, I get concerned about using resources that are already bare bones in your area when we have road repairs and residential neighborhood impact needs that this takes away from that. So, I guess I would have not as asked many questions if there was another grant that funded the time for your guys to do this work as well, or if it was coming from overtime that was covered by the grant. I just want the public to be aware that this is taking away from what other projects you have. So I hope we can do this expeditiously and at cost. Because when we budget these line items, I don't anticipate, because usually when we get these kind of grants, they cover the labor. In this case, that's the match basically from the city. I understand that. Usually we cut the state a check and say, here's the $20,000 for the match. I just wanted to be sure that this is coming from the DPW's budget and it's going to take men off the street to do this. So I'm in support of the project. It's just difficult at times for me to hear that we're taking resources from his department that he doesn't have as it is to do something that we all agree we would like to have done. So I just wanted to clarify that. Councilor Joseph and then Councilor Beazall. Councilor Joseph.
I just want to thank you for bringing it forward, and doing the grant application, all of the process that's involved, because without your help, I'm sure it wouldn't get done, because it's not something that's always on our radar, and it is a great idea to do it up there. Is that trail currently being used correctly, or are we going to have to do policing for four-wheelers, motorcycles, or anything like
It's
that? Is it-
not allowed.
Right, but are they
record-
currently using it that way?
I don't know if we saw a whole lot of evidence of that. The four-wheelers are sort of they go where they want, and with conservation land even, we have a hard time keeping them
Yeah.
out. But what we find with trails is that when people start to use them and they're aware of the restrictions, they sort of begin to police the situation better than it was prior. It's impossible to keep them off entirely, but
Right.
as Lenny indicated, it's a situation where you do incorporate barriers, as they do in rail trails, and you put up signs that say no motorized vehicles, and you hope that people who are lawful users of the trails and enjoy the trails will help to police that. And it does seem to happen, where people are enjoying the trails, they will create an atmosphere where people running roughshod over the situation will feel much less comfortable to do that. But it is, in fact, very difficult to prevent it from happening entirely.
Right, and being the owner of that property, do you have problems there already with motorcycles or four-wheelers, or is it pretty much just a passive trail?
I think it's pretty much passive. I've never heard of any real issues up there.
Because I know, as being a Ward 6, the rail trail proposal that we have already for going Leominster to Fitchburg, I've had a lot of constituent complaints with four-wheelers and motorcycles on that, right behind everybody's house,
Right.
all hours of the
Right.
night, coming into the neighborhood, so that's why it's a concern.
And I think if you look at the experience, for example, in the it's the North Central Mass Pathway or the Gardner-Winchendon Trail System, which is actually being expanded and has expanded more. Those people, it's extremely well used, and you find less of that, I think, where there's a lot of good use of the trail. So it is to some degree opening it up and to appropriate uses is going to, I think, help to diminish the inappropriate uses that I'm sure people are experiencing now.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Beazall.
Thank you. Last week, I actually went to Sterling to have a rail trail in Sterling, and it was 2 o'clock on a Wednesday, and there's probably 10 cars out there. It was amazing to see how many people on a Wednesday were out using it. It was very nice. I mean, there was no noise. It was very quiet. So I'm assuming this would be the same thing, but you are going to need a place for people to park, because I noticed
Yeah.
even down there, I can imagine on the weekends, it gets really crowded. My question is, so right now, the city owns this property, and we use it for the water department uses it?
This is a water main that runs along that corridor.
Okay, so we're not losing, the city isn't actually losing this land, so in other words, when the grant doesn't take away from us having access to this land, correct?
No.
Okay.
If they had to dig it up, it's not that hard. It's a soft surface. It's a rolled surface, but it's a soft surface. It's not an asphalt surface.
Okay.
Motion to approve 227. Oh,
I
okay.
still have Council's hand. President Kuchmarek?
Just curious about the time frame on this project. Do you have a hard completion date, or is this just by the end of this fiscal year?
I think we have 2 years or so to do this.
Yeah, I think so. I'm sorry I don't have the contract in front of me. But I guess if we were going to try to do it in 2 years, it would be good to try to do the first phase in the first year if possible.
Sure. And I know Councilor Di Natale's questions certainly have merit, particularly as I know we have a backlog. There's a never-ending backlog of work, but Commissioner Laxo, you've always been masterful at kind of navigating that backlog and trying to find those times to work on both reactive and kind of preventative maintenance things, as well as some of the recreational areas of the city that we need to continue to grow. So fair to say we'll probably start something, I imagine, next construction season,
Right.
After the thaw, and by the end of the fiscal year we'll have started that first phase. I know we had already, I believe, approved this concept probably a year or two back, if I remember correctly. What I don't remember is there any increased liability once this is used for recreational purposes and kind of the public is encouraged to go? Is there any liability that is extended on the city that we don't already have? Are we incurring anything new there?
I mean, it's already pretty much open to the public as it is. It'll be used by more people.
Okay. Well, certainly thanks to both of you. I look in the back, I see Mr. Casas and Ms. LeBlanc. I have no doubt that they were also a part of this, as they are many other rail trail efforts throughout the city. So certainly appreciative. I think it's one of the great parts about our city is that we have an urban downtown, but there's so many areas of the city that can be used for recreational purposes, and it's a real attribute and it's a real selling feature to people looking to start families in this city. So thanks for your efforts.
Council Donnelly?
Thank you. Does the grant have any restrictions for future use of the land?
The trail itself, I think, has got to be at least maintained because it's state money. I'm not sure if they're talking about 10 years or something like that. But generally, there's a period of time when you receive state money that you have to continue to that use. But there was no other legal change, and there's no conveyance of land, there's no conservation restriction, there's nothing but the construction of the trail. And it doesn't take away, as Lenny indicated, from anything the city already is doing or needs to do. Because if the city needs to dig up the water main, they're going to dig up the water main. They know that this is being constructed on top of the water main. So there's a compatible use there, is what I would say. The trail and the city's other needs for this land and other uses are, I would say, very compatible. One doesn't restrict the other. The primary purpose of the land is the water main. The city owns it for that purpose, and this is simply, that's the way the grant was written. It was very clearly written that way, so the state understands that what they're doing is supplying funds to construct a trail on top of that main.
Thank you. The other, just a comment, when the DPW was working on these projects, it's interesting to know that the workers are participating, and they also can further the exposure from friends, family. What did you do today? And if there's a problem, they know exactly where to go in the future. If you contract it out, your money doesn't go as far with prevailing rates, and somebody from out of town that will never come back and use it is the one that's doing the work. So I think it's kind of a double positive for us to have the DPW do the work, so I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Motion to approve 22716.
Motion made and seconded to approve 22716. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
22816, order that the City of Fitchburg approves the expenditure of funds from the Mass Department of Transportation under its statewide Complete Streets program for the Complete Streets Prioritization Tier 2 grant in the approximate amount of $49,989.13 for the purposes of said grant. Director Casassa.
Good evening, councilors. Before you tonight is a grant award from the state as part of its Complete Streets program. As many of you are aware, the city, like many other cities in the Commonwealth, has adopted a Complete Streets policy, which in essence means that we recognize the importance of making city streets and byways as accessible to the public as possible and as pedestrian-friendly as well as handicap-friendly as possible. The state, in order to encourage this, has also set aside through the Mass Department of Transportation construction funding that would be available to actually implement some of the improvements that the communities are considering. Part of that process is to develop a plan that would list those streets that are most amenable to the kinds of changes or that would make the most improvements to encourage pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, and all modes of transportation use. To summarize from the city's policy itself, I'll just read this one paragraph, which kind of sums it up. It's the expressed intent of this policy to include the needs of all people, regardless of how they travel, into the City of Fitchburg's everyday transportation decision-making process. This includes all users, regardless of their age, ability, ethnicity, or income, across all modes: pedestrians, bicyclists, transit riders, motorists, commercial vehicles, and emergency vehicles. Now, in developing the initial policy, the city did have some concerns because, as you all know, the Chapter 90 funding that the city receives is very limited in its scope. And to have to further divert those funds, even for worthwhile pedestrian improvements or bicycle lanes, means that we pave less roadway. That's why it's so important that the state is also providing funding for this program. And so if the city proceeds with this grant to develop a Tier 2 prioritization plan, in which we would be holding public meetings, working with the Disability Commission and other interested citizens to get their feedback and input. We'd also be conducting a walkability audit as part of this plan, at the end of which we would identify those streets that affect or impact the most number of people, that have readily available improvements that could be made, and then we will be using that prioritization plan to apply for up to $400,000 in grant funding. That's the maximum I believe the state is making available to communities to start implementing these. And a lot of them are fairly low-hanging fruit that may just involve improvement to signalization or striping certain streets with bike lanes, in some cases cutting in more handicapped accessible ramps. There are any variety of those kinds of improvements that we could fund through this that we won't have to fund through Chapter 90. So we think it's potentially a very positive thing for the city of Fitchburg, and we're hoping that we'll be able to receive funding through this program for the next several years.
Mr. Casassa, over the past, say, 3 to 6 months, I've received, concern from a resident with physical impairment being able to navigate neighborhoods near the downtown because of the condition of the sidewalks or the lack of sidewalks, and then beyond handicap accessible ramps to lead into crosswalks or proper signalization throughout the neighborhood. And certainly it's easy to explain how we have a lack of resources throughout the city for key projects. But what everyone wants to hear is that there's a plan moving forward as to how to address some of these issues and how to make our neighborhoods more accessible to all of its residents. So, I recently met with the Disability and Human Rights Commission to discuss kind of the very same issue, and was pleased to hear then from A.J. Torigny about the Complete Streets prioritization. And I think that's what's most important, is to understand, where do we have needs throughout our city, particularly through our most trafficked areas, and then be able to prioritize, where are we spending the funding, and where are we going to concentrate our time and efforts. So it's good to hear that we're taking those next steps to first assess where we are and what we need to do moving forward. The reality is probably, a long and exhaustive list of items that are going to come back, and to be able to explain to folks as they look to select their next residence, or as they look to open a business, to understand where they fall maybe on the prioritization, and understand where, maybe today we're not as accessible as we could be, but it falls within the short to intermediate plan, so it allows them to kind of plan around that, or conversely realizing that they're not on the short-term list, and maybe it's not the best place for them to move, but at least allows them that option. So while never excited to see that folks go without accessibility, at least understanding what that priority looks like, and allowing folks to be able to make informed decisions about their future and their accessibility to our public infrastructure, I think is crucial. So I'm excited to see this take a next step forward and be able to engage public input. So thank you for your efforts.
Council Boschman.
On this grant, you're talking about bicycles, you're talking about sidewalks. What I don't understand, they come up with all these kind of grants, but our sidewalks that we have already are deplorable. Deplorable. They're unsafe for even a normal person to walk up and down our sidewalks. They're unbelievable. They're falling apart. Are we going to take some of this money and repair these sidewalks, or can we do that?
If the priority is to deal with a particular sidewalk because it affects a larger number of citizens and it can be done most cost effectively, then my guess is that kind of a project would rank highly. But we have to develop the prioritization plan first with feedback from citizens, from city councilors, from the Disability Commission, from the people who are actually impacted by these conditions that you're talking about. The reality is, and I think we have to face that the city has an awful lot of sidewalks. We looked into developing a prioritization plan many years ago with the use of CDBG funds to see what we could do with that to help address the problems. What we quickly realized was that the scope of the problem was of a cost way beyond our capacity to fund with a small grant like CDBG. So we focus primarily on city entryways, and we have made some inroads and streetscapes work and some of the major sidewalks that are used. But that's a problem that's beyond the scope of that program, and I would have to say it's going to be beyond the scope of this program. But at the very least, with these funds, what we can do is we can say, but for that 150-foot stretch of sidewalk, there are at least 5 handicapped people who can't make that trip from their home to where they go shopping or where they do business. Let's make sure we prioritize that, because that we can afford. So we'll at least try to get at those real problems that don't cost that much money, and that would be a cost-effective use of these funds. That's really what these funds are for.
I don't know. I look at my ward. I mean, the elderly can't even walk on the sidewalks. They're unlevel, they're uneven, they're on everything. And we're going to go and make bicycle roads and different other areas everywhere else, and they can't even get out and walk to these places. I don't understand it. I'm puzzled. I have a hard time to swallow this. This is where I feel bad for the elderly in my neighborhood. I already had one fall on Dumas Street. I had another one fall off on Woodland Street because the sidewalks are uneven, and we're thinking about bicycle paths. I mean, really.
Counselor,
I don't know.
Counselor,
All right, I understand.
No. I sympathize with your statements, because to me it's difficult, because the state puts out these grant requests to the communities, and we answer in kind. I have an issue like you do, not with the planning department or the city, but with the state and even to an extent the federal government. The state gives us absolutely nothing for road repairs every year. But yet they find money, 50 grand here, 400,000 here for these grant programs that benefit people in general, but you always see the roads, the sidewalks, the things that we get complaints about every single day, and the things that keep piling up more and more. We don't seem to get assistance for those things. We usually get assistance from the state for targeted things specifically. So for the bike lanes, for the sidewalks with handicap accessibility, that's the state's requirement for the monies awarded to us. They're forcing us to tell them, using their criteria, this is what the money can be used for. You can't use it for anything else. Unfortunately, that's your tax dollars at work. I mean, to me, if I had to pick between 50 grand for this or 50 grand for a few streets, I think my choice would be obvious. But I share your sympathies, but when I hear about these grants and I hear about your sentiments, and you're absolutely right, I say to myself, well, take it up with your state legislature. I don't know what else to say. They release these grant programs, and they have very specific stipulations that we have to abide by if we accept the money. It's not as if the city's saying we can use it for roads and sidewalks that are in bad repair, but we're choosing not to, and instead we're going to use it for this. It doesn't work that way. They have very strict regulations on this money they give us. So I share your sentiments, but there really isn't anything we can do short of just telling the state we don't want the money, which I don't think I've ever seen ever happen because they're giving us money. Yes.
If I may, Counselor, I appreciate what's being said here, and I just want to point out that there is a great deal of flexibility in this particular program, and you know your constituents, and I'm hoping and expecting that we'll hear back from you about those particular areas in your that you're familiar with and that you've heard back from constituents that really need to be addressed so that we can do our job and come up with a really good priority plan and at least get at the biggest problems.
Councilor Joseph?
I guess my point, and it's similar to that, is if we were to be awarded $400,000 or something like that for the program to do the projects, why wouldn't we get $460,000 to put shovels in the ground? Okay, I mean, between everybody that's here and other volunteers from the Human Resource and the Disabilities Commission, I'm sure we could do this $49,000 worth of work for nothing, okay, with volunteer work from people that want to get this job done and put the shovels in the ground with this $60,000 or $50,000 along with the other $400,000, because we all know what the needs are. We all can probably get to what the priorities are as a group without, I don't know who's going to actually be expending these funds. Is this going to go for somebody in the planning department to do this
No,
work?
we would be using an engineering firm that has familiarity with the state's Complete Streets program.
So we're
That would
gonna
be-
give somebody outside 50 grand when I could put
Yes.
$50,000 worth of stuff on the ground, shovels in the ground and stuff like that. So I guess it's great that we're going to address it. I just think that we could probably do that somehow for free and spend $50,000 to do the work. So.
But without defending it, the rationale, I think, was that this is a program that they intend to fund for years to come,
Yeah.
and that if it's $400,000 a year before they give money out to every community, they want to see that we've gone through a legitimate process and that we've involved all the elements of the community and that we meet certain, so that they can say, okay, this isn't just
Right.
a pet project that's being done by whoever developed the plan, but rather it's something that involved the whole community and is truly a representative need assessment. That's I think what their rationale is.
$50,000 times 100
a lot of money.
communities, $500,000 to engineering firms that could go into projects. That's all.
Councilor Donnelly?
Thank you. I share the sentiments of what we all would like, but I want to thank Larry for the presentation and speaking loud enough that I could hear it. Thank you.
It's before you.
Motion to approve 22816.
Motion made and seconded to approve 22816. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you. 24016, in order that there be and hereby is appropriated $25,500, same to be credited to treasurer, parking garage capital expenses and charge against parking meter garage receipts. Treasurer Brooks.
Thank you. This request is to purchase a pickup truck to replace the one that the parking department has used for the last 15 or 16 years. The old vehicle was declared excess last spring by the council. It basically is too costly to repair, so we need to replace it. The pickup truck is used to move equipment or meters when we're replacing parking meters. It's used to plow snow in the winter to keep the garages open. The DPW does do the main plowing job for the garages and the parking areas, but when they're during the snowstorm, they're doing the plowing of the streets, and so we have to do some snow maintenance. We also use the vehicle when we do pickup of coin from the parking meters, and it's just a way to get around. Sometimes it's also used to transport some things back and forth to City Hall. I know my people sometimes go to the DPW to pick up paper, cases of paper. I did provide a spec of what I'm looking for after the last council meeting. A couple of councilors pointed out that this is the vehicle at spec is not four-wheel drive, and I probably should get four-wheel drive for plowing. Since I don't plow and I snow blow instead, I guess that's on me. And I do have a request in to get a quote for a four-wheel drive. That being said, I'm still looking for this request to be fulfilled. The funds are coming from the parking meter receipts, not from the general fund, so it would be funded from the revenue we get from parking meters and the garage.
Councilor Boschman.
I already answered. It's going to be four-wheel drive, and I'm going to tell you, they're going to spend more than $25,000 too.
To approve 24016.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 24016. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. 24216, last but not least, order that there be and hereby is appropriated $113,000, same to be charged against available funds and credited to accounts as follows: $85,000 to fire capital departmental equipment and $28,000 to fire capital building improvements. Chief Roy.
Thank you, councilors. First off, I'd like to thank the mayor and the auditor and the Capital Improvements Commission for the work on these projects. They're kind of long-standing capital projects that I know many councilors have talked about, but have been put on the back burner for years and simply are to the point that need to be addressed, and the mayor was good enough to put forward some money. The first part of the request is $85,000 to upgrade two of our support vehicles. I think I've explained to the council before. We went to the Capital Improvements Commission back in 2012. We hadn't bought any support vehicles in 10 years. And we set forth a plan to buy 3 in that year and then 1 every year thereafter. We did buy the 3 in that year, and then we didn't buy any more. So things got put back, and this year the mayor has approved it. One is to replace a 1993, our master mechanic's truck. It also includes a plow, power gate for the heavy equipment that he has to lift, spare fuel tank that he uses for fuel trucks during emergencies, like you saw recently at B.F. Brown. This summer we spent days and days in the woods and back of the high school. Vehicles had to be fueled. So this is an all-around vehicle. It's got a utility body, and it is replacing a truck that's 24 years old. The second that'll be assigned to our master mechanic. The second request is to replace a vehicle that'll be used by Lieutenant Jordan in the Fire Prevention Bureau. It's a standard SUV that we've been purchasing right along now, same as the Cruisers, same type vehicle, and the total is approximately $85,000 for the two vehicles. The second part of the request is $28,000 that we did. We worked with the Capital Improvements Commission a few years back. It's to upgrade to all 3 of our stations, have severe issues with the blacktop parking areas, aprons. The vast majority of this will go to Summer Street Station. Basically, the whole facility needs to be re-blacktopped. That facility was built in 1980. Nothing's been done other than crack filling And when we talked to the capital improvements a couple of years ago, they asked that we crack fill and seal coat, and I brought in 3 companies for quotes, and none of them would even quote it. They said this is beyond crack fill. Commissioner Laxo was good enough to send his guys down before last winter with some of the liquid spray and stones, but even that's torn up now from plowing. So that'll be the main part of the project. Thankfully, we now have a purchase agreement with Albert Construction through the city. And we are also going to do the back parking lot at Oak Hill Station, which is in real bad shape. Again, last year when they blacktopped Fairmont Street, I asked the commissioner if they could do the front of that station during the process of doing it, and they did. So this is the back parking area, which hasn't been done since the 70s. And a final piece, a smaller piece, the back entrance to fire headquarters by the credit union. It's all broken up there. It needs to be worked. It needs to be recut. So a small amount of this money will go to that repair. So it's basically blacktop repairs at all 3 stations, long overdue and beyond the point of crack filling and seal coating.
Make a motion to accept 242-16.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 242-16. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Thank you, councilors.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.